The temptation to use public power and play God is almost irresistible.
CIA blowback. If the U.S. intelligence agencies are currently engaged in war crimes using directed energy weapons, it would be logical to expect a pattern of prior behaviors that exhibit similar criminal activity. It is certain that the United States has destabilized dozens of countries and overthrown their elected governments. Just how many countries is uncertain. In Iran in 1953, the Eisenhower administration joined forces with British intelligence to overthrow the government of Iran, which was seeking a larger share of its country's oil revenues. CIA Director Allen Dulles and Kermit Roosevelt, the son of FDR, were able to direct Iranian army officers in a coup to overthrow Mossadegh, the elected government, and reinstall the fictitious monarchy of the Shah. The Shah immediately granted British Petroleum a 40% share of the oil concession, and American firms received 40% as a reward for their participation. The overthrow of Mossadegh emboldened the CIA and became a blueprint for future destabilization operations. Mossadegh represented the legitimate aspirations of a nationalist democracy that was thwarted in the name of anti-communism. The resulting chaos and radicalization of Iran is a direct result of interference in the internal affairs of that nation, what is referred to as blowback, the unintended negative consequences of covert actions against foreign elected governments. The Shah was described in a confidential CIA report as a dangerous sociopath who suffered from a dominating father and a sense of the illegitimacy of his mandate to rule. Savak was the name of the Shah's feared secret police, set up with the help of the CIA. Guatemala. In 1954, the CIA accepted and carried out a proposal from United Brands, Chiquita Banana, to overthrow the Guatemalan government, which was the only democratically elected government Guatemala had ever had. United Brands and the CIA replaced that government with 40 years of bloodshed under a series of barbaric right-wing dictators. U.S. taxpayers continue to fund these regimes under the repeated threat that if they do not, the Guatemalan people will fall prey to communism. A mere 2% of the population owned 72% of the land. 90% of the landowners were confined to the poorest 15% of the land. United Brands owned the railroads, the ports, and vast tracts of some of the most productive land on earth. Guatemalan President Arbenz had won the election with 65% of the vote in 1950. He tried to fulfill his mandate, which was land reform and a minimum wage modeled on FDR's efforts in the U.S. He seized the largest land holdings, including his own family's, and distributed 1.5 million acres to 100,000 families. The land was paid for in 25-year interest-bearing bonds, perfectly within the guidelines of the Kennedy-era Alliance for Progress program, or U.S. programs in El Salvador and Chile. The only difference were the investments by United Brands and the political influence they could bring to bear on the Arbenz government. In 1966, a swell of revolution brought a full-scale U.S.-sponsored counterinsurgency response program, including arms, advisors, and even Green Berets. A State Department study analyzed the program years later and stated, quote, "To eliminate a few hundred guerrillas, the government killed perhaps 10,000 Guatemalan peasants." In Iraq in 1958, General Abdel Karim Qasem led a coup, took power, and proclaimed a republic. He legalized the Communist Party and decreed land reform, granting autonomy to the Kurds. CIA Director Allen Dulles declared Iraq, quote, "the most dangerous spot in the world." Iran began to win the war in 1982, and the U.S., in fear of the Iranian Revolution, began to covertly aid and arm Saddam. The Reagan administration funneled $5.5 billion through the Atlanta branch of the Italian bank Banca Nazionale del Lavoro, guaranteed by the taxpayers under the Commodity Credit Corporation, to, quote, "promote American farm exports," unquote. Between 1986 and 1989, 73 transactions took place that included bacterial cultures for anthrax production, advanced computers, and equipment to repair jets and rockets. In 2002, Iraq was forced to deliver an 11,800-page dossier on the history of its weapons program to the UN Security Council. Bush administration officials took possession of the document first and cut 8,000 pages that detailed American and Western company sales of weapons and dual-use technology sold to Iraq prior to 1991. The legacy of the NSA Act of 1947 that established the national security state had the obvious consequences of the overthrow of dozens of legitimately elected foreign governments during the Cold War. The unintended consequences of blowback has led to a more hostile environment for U.S. national interest in the 21st century, but it has led to other less obvious consequences to the American Republic itself. The power of the U.S. intelligence agencies to overthrow foreign governments at will has also impacted the domestic American political landscape. The ability to destabilize the world almost at will has conferred the same ability to these agencies in American politics. For men with this kind of power, the temptation to play God on the American landscape and to control the future direction and fate of the United States has been irresistible.
The temptation to use public power and play God is almost irresistible.